Does the Bible actually condemn homosexuality? Hey guys, Ben here. I just got done watching a debate last night, so I guess I didn't just get done watching it, between James White and, I can't say his first name, Mr. Codrington in South Africa. It's a pretty recent debate, and it was just, it really struck me how anti-biblical, biblical, historical, and when I say I mean like, an atheist, being the negation. And it's just when I see this in the church and people that are saying that they're Christians and that this has always been, it's their arguments are so anachronistic. They try so hard to work their present theory and this idea that comes out of our modern culture back into scripture. And it's painful to watch, but it's really, the wickedness of it is just astounding. And the way that Mr. Codrington does it with such arrogance was, I guess, shocking, because he claims to be a Christian, an evangelical Christian, and he went through this thing, how he's been fired for standing up for what he believes, and he can't believe the shallowness of Christianity. And he starts with, well, I understand why people struggle with this, because they think it's a gospel issue, and, they think that it's a big deal, but it's really not, even though 4,000 years of Old Testament history and roughly 2,000 years of New Testament history have told us that it has been a problem, and it has never been accepted widely by the church for good reason. And when he goes back and he does the same thing that Matthew Vines does, that every liberal Christian does, they go back and they say, okay, well, we know that there's nothing wrong with being gay, lesbian, transgender, queer, whatever the list is up to now, and 5,000 different genders. There's nothing wrong with that. And we know there's nothing wrong with it because the Bible doesn't say there's anything wrong with it. In fact, here's the problem. We've been misinterpreting the Bible this whole time. We got it wrong. It wasn't until the 1960s and the sexual revolution took place that we finally started to get it right. Yep, see, those people in the past, the leaders of the Reformation, the early church fathers, all the people at the councils, they got it wrong, or they just didn't mention it because it wasn't a problem to them. That's why they never mentioned it. No, they didn't mention it because they already knew it was wrong intuitively. It violates God's binary creation with man and woman. And he goes into this whole thing where, there's only one thing that a woman can do that a man can't do: procreate. But that's it. No, that's not it. And it's, he just keeps dying. And this is the same thing. They all liberal Christians, all people who support homosexuality in the church and the transgenderism in the church, they do the same thing. They say, well, because we want positive affirmation in Scripture. We want them to positively show us verses that support what they believe. They say, well, there isn't any because we don't need them, because God doesn't have it's like saying, give me positive affirmation for Twitter, category error. But they'll make that argument, and it's just weird. And I noticed, I noticed this, and it was really, nobody ever touches on this, because they'll say, well, I support the lesbian, the gay, transgender, the LGBTQI, right? The whole list of them. I support all of that. But when they get into an argument, the only thing they argue about is homosexuality. That's it. And they never talk about the transgender part. Because if you're going to say that you support LGBTQ, the T's in there, the Q's in there, that means you support all of the acronyms, every single letter in there. So a transgender person who says, I was born in the wrong body, you have to support that, which in essence you're saying, God made a mistake. He put this person in the wrong body, made them the wrong gender, the wrong sex, and now they are fixing God's mistake. But people don't ever argue that because they know that if they get to that point, there's going to be no way they can argue for it. Now I know it's coming. I mean it's already here, but we'll get to that point. It'll eventually slip to where we'll just say eventually there'll be a large part of the church in America that will just by default accept lesbian and gay, and then when you have to argue for that, so they'll just leave that behind. They'll start with the presupposition that it's fine. Like, okay, well now we're moving on to the T part or the Q part or the I part, and so it'll get there. It's not quite there yet, but it's moving pretty quickly. I mean, we're 1-2 presidential elections away, 1 or 2 switching of the House and the Senate from just full-on pagan idolatry in this nation anyways, which is kind of where we're at. But leaving that aside, just the ease and the willingness of people to accept this with zero historical backing, and they do it with such pride. And you could see Mr. Codrington in his closing statements, and I think James White did a good point of pointing this out. He did a good job. He says, he spends most of his time saying, there's biblical support. Yeah, there's this. Yeah, there's that. And, he goes back and he reinterprets Leviticus 18. No, it's not about, he does the same thing. It's about gang rape. It's about orgy. It's about something that nobody believes, that no scholars hold up, that if you read commentaries, none of them will say that. But that's what it's about because we need it to be about that to support our argument. So then he does, kind of does that, it's kind of half supports his argument. He reinterprets all the parts that he needs to. And then he gets to the end, and that's when you find out what it's really about. These mean Christians, the church has been, the whole closing statement is just a straw man about how bigoted and mean the church has been. And he puts up the caricature, we've been putting these people, and then he just, all the supposed biblical argumentation and all the references and all his stuff just flies out the window because it's all emotion. I got fired for supporting these and the big meanies, and it's just, it's what I see on social media. And that's what he closed with. If you're going to spend the entire debate trying to tell us that there's no biblical reason for us to denounce homosexuality, I don't want to get him wrong, same-sex loving couples, I don't know where this category came from. Somehow he makes a differentiation between homosexuality being a sin, which it obviously is, and how that's just only bad, mean, evil homosexual acts are wrong. But the non-sinful homosexual acts that are done in a committed relationship, those are fine. Where are you getting that from? That category doesn't exist in Scripture. You are making that up. I mean, if you're really going to do this, and we're just going to open the floodgates, which is what happened, and it is happening, the LGBTQI, blah, 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 that's going to have the P in there pretty soon. If it doesn't already. It does in some people's minds, right? For pedophilia. Because the Bible doesn't explicitly say that we can't have relations with children. The Bible doesn't specifically say you can't have sex with a minor. It's not in there specifically, right? I mean, if we need explicit passages to do this, and I could find examples in history where this has happened, just like Mr. Codrington did with his argument. And it's just a slippery theological slope to run down. But he just doesn't care because it's all about emotion in the end. And that's how he ended his thing. That's how he ended his concluding statement, with emotionalism. It's just, I don't even really know how to describe it. The words. I mean, this is Rome. It's first century Rome. That's what we're turning into. The Pax Americana, the American peace, where it's just shocking, and the parallels between, politicians of the day saying it's fine for you to practice your religion behind closed doors, but when you come out into the people into the rest of us. You have to accept all of this. And that's like Rome. You can keep your religion, you can worship your God, but when you come out into public, you have to accept all of this stuff, all these other gods, all these other practices. Which is why Judaism was the only religion that got a pass, because Jewish people were like, no, we're not doing that. They'd rather die a painful death, give their life, than give into that. I mean, I wish we had that kind of strength today. The Christian church doesn't have that in America, because the Christian church is just a name for a group of people in a political parties. That's what it's boiled down to. Being a Christian means you vote Republican and you're a conservative. That's what it means in America. That's not what it actually means, but that's what it's become. So I know I kind of spun off on a little tangent there, but is homosexuality wrong? Yes, it is. It absolutely is. And the only way around that is to start with the idea that it's not, and then proof text your way through the Bible by reinterpreting verses that have never said that ever in 2,000 years of New Testament history. And none of the scholars will say that. None of the commentaries will say that, unless it was something that kind of came about by a liberal person in the 1960s. But they don't have any historical proof. I mean, if you're going to say that if you need to reinterpret all these passages, or you're going to go like the Matthew Vines route, and you're going to say, well, they just didn't know in the first century. Jesus didn't know. Paul didn't know. None of them knew. They did know. Read Philo. Some interesting stuff in there about people cross-dressing, transgenderism. Yeah, it's there. But if you're going to say that they didn't know, you're saying Jesus didn't know. And if you're saying Jesus didn't know something, you're saying he was limited. And if he was limited, then he's not God. Or he's a lesser God. Then you got to go some kind of weird open theistic route. I am a little too fearful of God to make such an ignorant claim. But that's where these people are. They've been given over to a strong delusion. They fall under Romans 1. And that's just where we are. So as Christians, real Christians, who believe in the Bible, inerrancy, and sufficiency, that's the big one now. Is the Bible sufficient to guide our everyday lives? Yeah, it is. But if you're going to say that God didn't know this, and Jesus didn't know that, and the apostles didn't know this, and those verses didn't say that, then what is the Bible to you? It's not inerrant, it's not sufficient. You can say that, but your words are empty, because you obviously show that that's false with your theology. So I think this probably needs an expanded teaching, and I'll probably do a Christian critique video on this, put that in that series. But I just wanted to touch on it, mostly just because the debate was fresh in my mind, and it's obviously the debate is going on in the culture right now, and it's not going anywhere. It's going to get worse. It's going to get way worse, and eventually it's going to be enforced by law, and it'll be illegal for everybody not to support all of this, even though the LGBTQ percentage of people in America is maybe 2 to 4%, maybe, I think, on the high end. Even if it was 5%, which is not, they want us to bow down to 5% of people and enforce laws that say you have to support these 5%. What if there was 2 to 4% of people that were KKK members, or part of the Black Panther Party, or were Nazis? It'd be insane to tell everybody in America, you have to bow down to this minority of people because we like to use them to get votes. That's what it is. That's really what it is. Your politicians don't care about you. They're not doing this for you. They're doing it to get votes. I mean, the Republicans, most of them don't care about us either. So it's not like I'm saying the Republicans are good, Democrats are bad. No, they're all bad. So guys, that's my short viewpoint on that. Like I said, I'll make a longer video, a Christian critique of it. I'll get that up, and we'll look at some biblical passages. We'll look at positive affirmations of the man and woman binary system that God created. And we'll see that there's absolutely zero positive affirmation for anything other than that. It's not just about procreation. It's a lot more than that. All right, thanks, guys.